Alright, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Daily Dungeon Diving. So, it's been a while since I've done a dungeon run. I've been busy with various things, and also a couple of updates came out. Yeah, two updates came out, since then. So the first one was obviously the big one, which was version 1.2.0. Which released the bowstring into the game. So the bow is now available. They also reduced the recipe. It used to take, I believe, 3 planks, 3 bowstrings, and 4 cords originally. But obviously that's a little unrealistic. So they reduced that significantly. They haven't implemented crossbows into the game. So they've actually changed the recipe to the simple crossbow as well to currently require birch planks, which is really just like a placeholder item to make sure that nobody crafts one, because they don't know how they want them to differ from the bow. Now I have gotten a couple of bowstrings, so I can tell you the places where you're likely to find them. I found. Let me see, where did I find both of mine? I found one of them in a night cache. So night caches are a likely spot to find one. And I believe the other one I found in a regular chest in the tier 3 zone. So as far as where you can get bowstrings, because I know a lot of people are really wanting to use bows. They want ranged weapons and whatnot. The tier 3 zone, night cache or otherwise, is obviously a good place to look. Besides that, it seems there is a pretty good likelihood of finding a bowstring in the new event that also came out with version 1.2.0, which is Night at the Cemetery, which I made a video on. So if you're wondering what that's like, go ahead and check it out. There's a pretty good chance to find a bowstring there, and we believe it can be found at other events as well. However, it's probably fairly rare at the easier events, like the Broken Car or the Fallen Knight or anything like that. You're probably not going to find a bowstring there. You could if you're lucky, but you're probably not. The other event that I think is most likely to find a bowstring would be Treasures of the Damned. Now, that being said, the other really good spot to find bowstrings is just in the dungeon itself. So we're gonna kind of hop on in here, and I'm gonna be using a somewhat different strategy for this run. I'm gonna try, emphasis on the try, guys. I'm gonna try to do like a super cheap run in terms of weapons. So you can see I do have a claymore here that's nearly broken. That, if all goes according to plan, will never get used in this entire run. I'm going to attempt to do a run, guys, using only Cartthils and only maces and potentially a falchion or something like that. I'm also going to go a little cheap on healing items. I'm going to try and use a bunch of holly berries, because for the most part, the fights that we have in here, they don't really... It's not a huge amount of enemies. It's just like one enemy. I pull one enemy from a room, fight him, pull another enemy from a room, fight him, pull another enemy from a room, fight him. And that's just kind of how it works. So I have plenty of opportunities to heal in between each enemy that I fight, for the most part. So I don't think that is really too much of an issue. Now, another change that we do have to talk about in the dungeon is apparently they have changed it such that now AIs can enter the dungeon and they will come find you and they will kill you. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing that they added. I don't know why they added it. honestly, I'm not sure it really makes a whole lot of sense to me. Specifically, they added it and then they didn't mention it like at all. Nowhere in the patch notes or in the update notes or anything like that they mention that they added AIs to the dungeon. But multiple people have encountered them. Multiple people have taken screenshots and such, so they're there. Honestly, the first person that posted a screenshot of it in our Discord group, I honestly didn't believe them. I thought it must have been photoshopped, it must have been hacked or something. But no, it's apparently a very real phenomenon, which is kind of odd to me. But I mean, hey, whatever. It's turned out to be legit. So we have to be a little bit careful. We don't know exactly whether or not there's any common factor that causes them to spawn. Whether it's just completely random, or maybe it's based on a timer of how long you've been in the dungeon, or maybe it is based on, you know, something else entirely. We don't know. So yeah, that's going to be a bit of a learning experience for all of us. That's one thing I wanted to avoid. I don't want to get hit by the plague spawn. Getting hit by the leper soldier is whatever, but the plague spawn? No, I really don't want to get hit by that. Now, some people might be wondering, well, the bow is in the game, so why don't you, make one? You said you have bowstrings. Why don't you make one and show that off? And I could. However, I was recently watching Rhaegor, who is a fellow mod on the Discord server. He did a stream about the bow mechanics, and essentially what it told us is that the bow mechanics for Grimsoul are essentially exactly the same as the bow mechanics for Last Day on Earth. Now, if you're not familiar with the Last Day on Earth bow mechanics, that's fine. I would highly recommend checking out Rhaegor's channel for that stream that I mentioned. If you're not sure how to spell it, it is Raygore. That is Rhaegor. And yeah, he is not a person who plays LDOE as far as I know. So he had no idea what the LDOE bow mechanics were, so he kind of went into that completely blind. But he tried out pretty much everything I think you really need to try out to get the grasp of the mechanics for the bow. So to summarize it, essentially, it works the same way as most ranged weapons in Last Day on Earth, in that they cannot do sneak attacks. You will not get any sneak damage off, ever. So you can't use a bow to sneak attack, which is, to be fair, pretty much what we expected, really. And then the other thing is, the bow is a charge-up weapon. So essentially, like most weapons, you just, you tap the button or whatever, and it goes and does the attack, right? Well, with the bow, that's not how it works. You have to hold the button down to charge up the bow. Which, I mean, it's essentially, you just have to, you're pulling the bowstring back, in order to put tension on it so you can, have the arrow fly out of there at lethal velocities. But the thing is, the damage that the bow does, which actually, let me finish this guy off real quick, and we will go back in here. They've also changed the damage on it. It now does 23 damage as opposed to 20. It says 23 damage, and for pretty much every weapon, whenever it says it does X amount of damage, it does X amount of damage, except for the fact that, you have to account for armor. Armor will, of course, reduce the damage done. However, with the bow, it's actually a slightly different mechanic in that the longer that you the longer you charge the weapon, the more damage it does. So basically, you have to charge it up in order to get that full damage. If you just put it on auto, it actually only does like 8 or 9 damage per shot on enemies with absolutely no armor. So it's actually a little bit of a letdown in that sense. So it has really nice range. It's got a range of 5, I believe. Is that? Yeah, my finger's kind of in the way, so I can't see it that well. Yeah, 5. Which is like over 2 times the range of the halberd. Basically, as soon as the enemy's on screen, they're within your attack range. And another thing we found out as well is that the bow cannot hit an enemy unless you are locked onto them, unless the enemy's name pops up at the top of the screen. Before you start charging your bow. You can't like anticipate the direction they're going to come from, release an arrow, and then, all of a sudden it hit them. No, you have to be locked on to the enemy from the get-go. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Which, that's fair enough, I think. I think that's fine. But it's kind of, I took a hit. Oh well. It's kind of a bit of a pain because it takes so long to charge to get your full damage that it kind of generally by then the enemy has probably already closed a lot of that distance. So it's not a super great weapon in terms of being able to stay away from enemies and do damage without getting hit in return. At least not as good as a lot of us would like, certainly. There's a reason why most people in Last Day on Earth call it trash, and that's because, well, number one, they have guns in that game, and number two, it's just the charge-up mechanic makes it far less useful as a ranged weapon than a lot of other weapons could be. Alright, so I'm going to want to aggro this plague spawn and bring him out. There was a Forsaken back there, so we're going to have kind of our first little Forsaken run without using a high damage weapon. The only reason that I picked up that Claymore at all, really, is because I wanted to have an emergency weapon. And oh shit, this is not going the way I want it to weapon, so that I could there we go, so that I could just quickly switch to that and have it save my life. that is literally the point of that. Now obviously, the armor here that I'm going to be using isn't super cheap, so that is something that you should keep in mind. I'm not really using this as like a sustainable armor, or a sustainable amount of armor to use constantly on these guys. This is just kind of stuff that I had laying around that I kind of want to use up a little bit. So we're going to go in here, and I want to see what the enemy is up here besides the Forsaken. And I'm not really happy with that lag. I think that is a Possessed. We're going to go ahead and hit him. That's fine, yeah. Bam, bam, bam. Okay. Go ahead and take some honey, and we're going to try double auto. Okay, that worked pretty decent. So, yeah, it's not super amazing. It's not something that I would like to do all the time, but it is reasonably effective. Okay. Especially if you're really cheaping out on healing items and you're just using a crap load of holly berries, which I brought a whole bunch of them down to the dungeon. I saw Rhaegor, and I think Massus also uses this strategy of using just a ton of holly berries in the dungeon, because again, you have lots of time in between most fights to heal. So the main drawback of using holly berries for healing, which is just that they're gonna make you puke eventually, which obviously it would be really bad to have to puke in the middle of a fight when you're fighting like Forsaken or something. That would obviously be very, very bad. But for the most part, you can, just not have to worry about that. It's generally not a problem for the most part. I'm a little sad that I don't have any good kiting spots though. Well, we'll make do. We make do with what we have. Now I believe there is a big guy in here. I thought I saw a silhouette of a big guy. Of a desecrator. But maybe that was just my imagination. I don't know. Yeah, again, there's not really a good kiting spot here, so I'm just gonna have to take up a couple of hits. Thankfully, I did not get poisoned there. That would have been very unfortunate if I had. Like, we've got a decent enough kiting spot in that room. It's just I can't use it right now because it's full of enemies. But anyways, getting back to the bow. Beyond the fact that it is a charge-up weapon, so obviously the use isn't as great as we would like. It actually has, like I mentioned before, a minimum cap that you need to charge it to a certain extent in order to get the full damage. It also has like a maximum charge cap, where if you try to charge it for too long, essentially I guess the idea is that your arms get tired. So you kind of start shaking the bow like crazy. It just starts shaking, and you become super inaccurate with it. And once that happens, essentially you are guaranteed to miss. So it's kind of a skill weapon in that regard, in that you need to know exactly the timing for how long you need to charge to get max damage, and how long before that max damage turns into just a complete miss. Okay, it looks like I'll be able to use this kiting spot now. Alright, that works. Sweet. So, you can't just, charge it forever. You can't just, like, aggro something and then run all the way to the other side of the map and charge and charge and charge and charge, in order to make sure that you have full damage. Again, that wouldn't even work anyway, because you have to be locked onto the enemy when you start charging in order for the bow to hit. Now, thankfully, when the bow does miss, whether or not you had a target in mind, when the bow does miss, it will not take the durability of the weapon. So, thankfully, there is that at least. So the bow isn't like a super wasteful weapon in that regard. Is there a kiting spot in here? Not really. I'll go ahead and take him back here. So yeah, the bow is it's kind of okay. If the bowstring wasn't as rare as it is, I would say that the bow is essentially a moderate improvement over the Carthill, in that if you're kiting enemies, it is a great way to deal with them. Now, another reason why I didn't make a bow is because of the last feature that we have found out about the bow itself, and that is that the bow has a different reduction in damage when you are attacking enemies with armor. So basically the way it works is with any melee weapon, you have an armor value of, say, like, I don't know, 100. And that armor value is going to give you a set percentage of damage reduction. So if you have 100 armor or whatever, and I don't have my numbers directly in front of me, so I'm just gonna make up some numbers off the top of my head. Don't take these as accurate. But if you have, say, 100 armor and you're getting attacked by a knight who has 49 attack, you know, you're gonna get, like, I don't know, maybe 29 damage. So essentially, if we kind of just, well, actually, we could also just say Forsaken because they have 50 attack. So if we just round that up to 50, just for the sake of simple math, and you take 30 damage from them with 100 armor, then you have 20 damage reduction, and that would be 40% of that enemy's attack. So the 100 armor would give you 40% damage reduction. However, that works basically the same no matter what melee weapon is used against you. The problem is, now we found out that damage reduction value is not the same with ranged weapons. Ranged weapons have a massive drop-off. And actually, I'm just going to kill these guys without kiting them, to save a little time. So we don't know exactly how much the damage difference is. However, the developers did mention when they introduced the bow that the bow most likely would not help us out when fighting heavily armored enemies such as Knights and Templars. And obviously the Forsaken and Desecrators are kind of lumped in with that as well. So we don't know exactly how bad the armor really affects the bow, but we do know that it is significantly more than melee armor. So I don't know what the exact values would be, but I'm going to kind of make a base assumption and say that probably about it could be as bad as doubling the damage reduction. So, like, again, 100 armor with it's like might be like 40% damage reduction, but that's with melee weapons. With a ranged weapon, 100 armor might be as much as like 75 to 80% damage reduction, which we don't know necessarily the exact values that most of the enemies have in terms of armor. JCF did a video forever ago that labeled all of the enemies at that time, which I believe he made that video right before The Witch was released. Not that it really matters for The Witch, because she doesn't have any armor anyway. But he made a video that kind of, he basically put exact armor values on a lot of the enemies, and I would say for the most part, JCF is the one YouTuber who does Last Day on Earth and Grim Soul Survival and all of that, where I would literally take his word for it, because he does a great job with researching this kind of stuff and making sure that he doesn't put out false information and whatnot. So I pretty much trust his word. I go with that. But for a lot of the enemies that have been introduced afterwards, the Forsaken and the Desecrator in particular, and also the Leprous Soldier also has armor. We don't really know what their armor values actually are, so it's a little bit tricky to see how useful the bow would actually be against any of them. And obviously, the bow is, again, it's pretty much an improvement over the Cartfill, because it's not a high damage weapon, but with its range, it would be great for kiting enemies. So that would be the general use for it. However, again, we don't really know the use because of I can't even spit it out. We don't know whether or not it's actually useful against these dungeon enemies because of how much more it is affected by armor. The damage drop-off could be so bad, even against like leprous soldiers, that it essentially becomes a weapon that goes from 23 damage down to like 6. And if you're doing 6 damage a shot, then honestly, you're probably just better off kiting them with a Carthill. So again, that's kind of the main reason why I'm not using a bow in this one. Also, they kind of mentioned that they want our feedback about bows. They would really like to see what we think about it. They wanted that feedback before they put in crossbows, so for all we know, the crossbow may be a massively improved version of the bow that will simply require a lot more to make it, but it will potentially not have all of the problems that the bow has. So it's kind of, I kind of, seeing as how bowstrings are rare, I want to save mine. But anyways, we've been going on for a little while here, so I'm going to go ahead and end this episode right here, guys. Hopefully, I haven't ranted too much to drive you all insane. I was kind of fumbling with my words there at the end with the trying to explain that the bow takes a lot less, or takes a lot more, God, I can't even say it now. I don't know. I don't really have a good way to explain it. It doesn't do as much damage against armored enemies as melee weapons, I guess. But I don't really like the way that sounds. There should be a simpler and easier and faster way to do it. I just can't think of it right now. But anyways, yep. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, guys. Take care.